Hi, I'm Liz Larson with Transform One Idea, and I'm here today with the fabulous Madeleine Eno from, let me get this right, In the Right Place with the accent on the right, W-R-I-T-E. It's really cute. Hi,
Sure.
Madeleine.
Hi, nice to see you, Liz. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Well, Madeleine and I get to see each other occasionally. We share a client in common, and that's how we met. And so Madeleine, I'm so excited to do this interview with you. I've wanted to do it for a while because what you do is so fascinating to me. So Madeleine is and let me correct me if I'm wrong, Madeleine, a ghostwriter,
Mhm.
an editor, a copywriter, and what else?
Well, I call it kind of message strategy. I help people really think about what they want to say and how to say it so that it reaches their ideal people. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I happen to know that what that means in, everybody else's language is that Madeleine makes your words look amazing. So the client that we share together, I write a lot of things, a lot of content for her. And I always think it looks pretty good. And then we send it off to Madeleine and somehow it comes back beautiful, if that makes any sense. Everything just flows right. And there's, just tiny tweaks where it still is my voice or our client's voice. That just sounds pretty. So that's, what I've experienced that Madeleine does. So really very, very cool.
Thank you.
But so Madeleine, to start off, I want to ask you if you will clarify what those three things are that I listed. And I'll tell you what made me think to ask it to you, because we got to meet each other face to face recently in the Portland area. And I was telling people what I was doing on this trip. And I said, I'm meeting a Madeleine Eno, and she's a copywriter and editor and ghostwriter. And they all said, ooh,
Right.
ghostwriter? And I know, everyone thought what it meant is that you wrote about ghosts.
Yeah.
So
It's a passion of mine. Right.
So would you clear that up for us? Start with ghostwriter.
Yeah. Well, ghostwriting, it's so funny that you tell the story because I just spent 3 days last week beginning a ghostwriting process with a client up in Seattle. So I was in her home for 3 days, and her daughter, who was like 10, came in and was like, she asked the same question, like, are you really a ghostwriter? Well, it's kind of like, are you really a ghost? But anyhow, ghost only because I don't know, actually, I should look up how the term came about. It's basically because you're sort of invisible in the process, and ghostwriting is typically, people use it for articles or blogs, but typically it's for books where someone has a great story to share and doesn't have time, doesn't like to write, isn't a writer, and they hire someone who will interview them at length and then write the book in their voice. So I think ghost just because it's behind the scenes.
So, it's
Unless
really,
they're a ghost specialist.
unless they are ghost specialists, so that would be extra
It's
cool.
about ghosts.
Yeah. It's a really interesting idea because not everybody is a writer,
No.
but we all have a story to tell. And so many people want to write a book, but they're not a writer. Like they don't have the first idea where to begin. And that's really that piece of it, the ghostwriting, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, and some people might be okay writers, but they don't want to, it's such a commitment to write a book. Not everybody is moved to dedicate many months of their life to one task. So
Yeah. So
it can be also for the non-writer. I call them, we all use words, but we don't all write. Or just the busy writer who doesn't really want to dedicate that time.
yeah, there definitely is a difference between writing and and conveying a message and really writing something intriguing. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's really okay. So let's move on. Copywriting. What's copywriting?
Copywriting is sort of like ghostwriting in that you're writing something for someone else, but it's generally short. If the phrase is used for shorter pieces, so a homepage would be a piece of copy, blogs would be copy, ad copy would be copy. So just it refers to writing a shorter piece, and copywriting in that sense also has it has a sales slant to it. Ghostwriting doesn't necessarily have that.
So you might even write the language for a sales funnel, for example.
Yeah, I'll do a sales funnel, email sequences, blogs, yeah, and homepages, the granddaddy of them all.
The granddaddy of them all. So for those of you who maybe don't know what a sales funnel is, if you have an online business of any kind, there are a series of emails that go out in what's called a campaign, and a person like Madeleine would write that copy so that it's compelling and interesting. Right, Madeleine?
Yeah. Hey, did you get my email yesterday? I noticed you didn't click on it. Here's what you can do. Yeah, that's the emails that she's talking about. Yes, I do write those. And the goal is to, like, how do we come at them in a new way that doesn't sound like, if you're like me or Liz, you delete way more emails than you open.
Yeah.
What is it about the person that I always ask people to think about? Whose emails do you open?
Yeah.
Regularly? Like, if you see them, even if you're busy, you'll open them and read them. And those are the ones you want to sort of investigate and see what is their copy sounding like that makes it fun or moving or always interesting.
Yeah, and having a copywriter really helps you with that, because not everybody has that bit of language. Like, you know, if you're searching around for words, if you don't know what big words mean, maybe, I mean, there's a million reasons why you would have someone else write that copy, and hopefully somebody who's really good at it.
Yeah, and again, some people just, you know, I'm also, I really like, I like to edit because I really get the essence of what someone's really trying to say. Not that I can't get that from when they're talking, but that collaboration. So even people who can bang out, you know, rough first drafts and just get their ideas down, that's a good starting place.
Yeah, so that's next. So what is an editor?
Yeah, an editor is someone who just takes your words and makes them sound like you, and really, because it's like the words are like a delivery system for our ideas, and you got to really think of who they're going to all the time so that they land well. And so that's what an editor really does, is help you make sure that the words that you've created land as well as they can where they're intended to.
Well, and also just the grammar part as well.
And the grammar part. I always feel like the grammar part is like way down. Like grammar, schmammer. Yeah, we'll make sure your grammar works. But it's really like to me, gets much more interesting about the ideas and how you're conveying them. But yes, grammar is very important.
It is. And I want to ask you this too, because I've noticed a lot in emails that I get, in you know, if you see videos where there's words that cross, I've seen it a lot where they're not worried about grammar. They use slang. They're talking way more casually. That's a trend that's happening now more. Does it drive you crazy, or are you all for it?
Oh, that's such a good question. I'm okay. I don't mind people getting a little street or whatever in there, and you know, because it's how we communicate. So I think that's kind of fun. But where it gets really casual, like never proofread anything, you know, the amount of video, oh my God, that you see, or just headlines with great giant typos. I am sort of a stickler for proofreading, but I think have fun with it, you know, play with it, push the boundaries of language. And especially if that's who you're speaking to, the person that's going to get that. Like, I might not be your client, but your client's going to love that.
Yeah.
That's another thing to consider.
Is it your opinion that it can make it more relatable?
Totally. Yeah. Like some kid in a hoodie and a skateboard isn't going to, you know, if I'm very precise and grammatical and elegant in my words, it's not going to be his stuff. So yeah, I think there's coding for us as customers, potential customers and potential clients. Things are coded so that we'll understand them.
Yeah. It's funny because Leah, my business partner, and I were talking about this recently, how if somebody 100 years ago were to try to read something that we write now, there are so many things in there that have no idea. What's an emoji?
Right.
What's a Facebook post? Right. Why do they keep talking about posts all the time?
Right. Yeah. Are they building fences all over the place? Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
fascinating, isn't it, how language evolves?
it's true. And so Leah, who's also my daughter, is 11 years older than our son. And when he texts, the things he uses, the abbreviations, are different than even what she does.
Yeah.
So there's this gap where you have to kind of decode what's there. And so if he's talking to his peers, they understand that. But if
Right.
he's talking to Leah's peers, they don't necessarily get it. And if they're talking to me, it's another language altogether. So
Yeah.
is that a little bit of a minefield for you, or do you just kind of flow with it?
Well, I think you can use it to your advantage. Again, just thinking of who you're talking to and what's really authentic. Because me, even if I try to talk to somebody your son's age by using all those words, it's just ridiculous, right? It's
Yeah.
so does not fit. And they're like, oh my God, running as far as they can away from someone who would use that language. But understanding that language is a different thing. Getting it and knowing what they're trying to say. Because when you come down to it, it's all ultimately heart to heart. Language changes. People don't speak the same language and they can communicate. So yeah, I think to come from the heart and be authentic with what your real language is the main thing. So let everybody talk to each other and just proofread your work.
Just proofread your work.
That's all
or have Madeleine do it for you.
So, I'm not actually a very good proofreader. Editors are not necessary.
Oh, really? Okay, so that's different then too.
Yeah, there's levels of editing that do not I'll touch things as I go along, but I'm not I've hired proofreaders who are just unbelievable. Yeah, it's hard to think of the big picture and the tiny picture. So I'm more big picture-y.
For that, even sometimes just having someone else read it. Or I found for myself reading it out loud. Absolutely. I find so many problems when I read my own work out loud. Yeah. Or I'll just pass it on to my business partner, Leah, and she's a great proofreader. And she finds my terrible mistakes. So
well, and if you have that person, that's great. My husband is not a reader. He's not in our entrepreneurial world. But he can always find what's just out of sync in my writing. So yeah, it's good to have those people to look at our writing.
Yeah, that's definitely one level for sure.
Yeah.
Of proofreading. So tell us, I have a list of questions to ask you that I know everyone's dying to hear about writing a book and how to do it. But tell us, I think it'll help us a lot more to know a little bit more about you and your background a little bit. And, some of the languages that you speak, like, I know you speak creative and I know you speak some woo-woo and some of those languages. So tell us a little bit more about you and how you got started and that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, the short version is, I was, on the resume level, I was a magazine editor in Boston for years and then moved out to the West Coast and decided not to stay in the editorial field purely, and just figured I could try a bunch of different things. And what I noticed, I was teaching yoga and bartending and teaching writing and doing some freelance writing, and all of those things, even the bartending and the yoga, had writing involved. I was always doing the writing for the place I worked or helping customers. So that's when I just decided to start my own business as a writer of any, and I was basically like anything. I just had opened up shop, and as the years went by, I sort of discovered the online world, and then kind of conscious entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs with a spiritual bent. So started gravitating more over there as the years went by. So yeah.
Very cool. That's interesting. So magazine editing in Boston. Wow, that sounds important.
It was fun. It was an outdoor magazine, actually, located in Boston, called Outdoors, and it was a blast. It was really, really, really fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
So now you're doing the ghostwriting and editing and some copywriting for, you said, a lot of spiritual entrepreneurs. Is that
spiritual entrepreneurs, but not necessarily only.
Okay.
Everybody's consciously thinking and wants to make the world a little better. I think there's where they're all, that's what they all share in common. Everybody's working on something pretty interesting.
That is really interesting, that you don't necessarily have to have a spiritual slant, but a conscious slant.
Yeah.
So environmental things. What are some other things? So what are some topics of books that you've helped with?
Well, just the one that you knew, but I was just about to go, the bear scientist in Alaska who spent 50 years working with the bears, and his is more on an environmental piece because the, global warming is certainly affecting our critters. And I've worked on a few memoirs for people with very, very interesting and colorful backgrounds, a couple of those coming out. A couple books about money, consciousness, and women. A book that I just saw the first draft of that's about how your energy and your mindset affect your money. One of those books that we can all use more of.
Relate to.
Yeah. How human consciousness develops and how we need to change in order to go to the next level. Another book I'm working on. There's a bunch in the shop right now. An energy healer who's writing a book on parenting, which is filled with like cool energy tricks you can use on your kids.
Wow, I love it.
I know. So a lot of different topics.
Wow. I mean, that really is a pretty broad range. And what's interesting is I wouldn't have thought of it, but it is all a form of consciousness.
Yeah.
And seems like that's starting to be more prevalent, which is amazing. If you think about it, that many projects are in the works that are in the consciousness realm. So right. That's very cool. Is it hard for you to switch mindsets between books? Like, how do you move back and forth between books?
Yeah. Well, it's always nice to have a really long time with a book or a couple of days. If I'm editing a book, I like to put a bunch of days together to let it kind of percolate and remember things as I go back and forth. But there's just a few I don't quite have the business model yet where I can just do one book at a time. So there's usually a few lurking around in there in different levels of completion.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to give it some time. And it's also sometimes, I don't know if you find this, but sometimes you can work on a project, go do something else, can come back and see it all new. So sometimes it's handy to be able to go back and forth.
Yeah, we do that here too. Sometimes we'll have 3 different clients' projects in a day.
Yeah.
You have to almost have a headspace for each one.
Yes.
And, so that's interesting. And I was thinking about this interview with you and thinking, how in the world does she do that? Well, it would have seemed to me you'd be so immersed in a book. You can
get pretty immersed. Yeah, and ideally it's immersion only benefits because if I wanted someone editing my book, I would want them to kind of disappear to a cabin in the woods and just read for a few days and really enter the world of the book. Yeah. Okay,
so I want to ask you some of the things I know people are dying to know because I'm dying to know it myself. So about writing a book. So, it's said that everybody has a book in them. And then there are some of us, and I include myself, who are, on the verge or have at least started something. I mean, I have 3 at the moment that I just add to occasionally. Mm-hmm. And what I found was, I do a lot of writing and I'm the queen of an outline and a storyboard. I know how to do those things for other projects.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm good at that. And then I got my outlines for my books all done. I've thought them through so carefully. Then I start to write my chapters and I start to get confused. Like, does this go in this chapter or another chapter? Or this one's bleeding into that one. And then if I finish this one, do I need that one? So, wow. I realized as I got into it that I was not prepared at all for writing an entire book. So here's my number one question. What is the number one misconception people have about writing a book? What's the thing that most people...
It's almost like it's the misconception can almost be that it's easy or that it's super hard. Both ways are sort of a misconception. It's not easy at all. And that, as you're experiencing, it takes a lot of traction with your mind. And we aren't that, myself included, we are jangly, jittery, social media ruined humans.
Social media ruined. I love
I won't say we're ruined yet. We can save ourselves. But the idea, deep focus is rare in our world. Those times when you're like, okay, I'm shutting everything off. I'm only going to do this. So that it was what makes it pretty challenging to write a book.
And I suppose it probably really depends on the subject. If it's a memoir, you kind of have a flow of your own life, how that flowed. Or if you're writing, in my case, I'm teaching a modality, so that they're different.
Yep. Yeah. And the more that you know where you're going, I always say it's like walking into the woods. If you know where you're going, it's beautiful and you get exercise and you're in tune. But if you don't know where you're going, it's panicky, it's questioning, it's doubting, it's fearing. So the more you know exactly where you're going. So having an outline is a great place to start, but then even really looking like, what's the mission of each chapter? What do I want the reader to know at the end of this chapter? How do I want to, if I'm taking the reader on a journey, which every book does, where are they now? Where are they now? And just checking in with where the reader's at. So there's a lot of tricks and tools around that part. But so I think the misconception, and I don't think writing a book is like a book in a weekend either. I don't think that serves the reader at all, because I think you're asking someone to sit down and spend hours with this thing that you wrote in a couple hours.
Yeah.
It's not a fair trade, and the amount of development and thoughtfulness and letting it percolate, letting it sit for a while is really important. So I don't want to. So the idea that it's too hard is a misconception. The idea that you can do it in a weekend, I think, is a misconception.
Yeah, I mean, I think those both sound right. That would be what people would think. I mean, I thought it was going to be easier for me.
Right.
Because it seemed like an extension of some of the things I already do. It wasn't.
Yeah.
So that's why they're all still on my computer. But that's something that you really help people with, right? Is pulling those pieces out.
Yeah. And again, like you can do for your client, if I asked you to help a client with a book, I'm sure all those things that you're struggling with would just be like, okay, I can figure out this client. So having someone help with it is always, it's like anything we do. It's just even having someone in the house, it makes you do your cleaning or something. We tend it when someone else is witnessing it with us.
It's true. And it seems like when it's ours, it's very personal.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's not a memoir, what I'm writing it's personal. And then all of those little things come up. So that leads me to my next question. What's the number one fear that people come to and they say, this is my fear about writing?
Yeah. Well, I have to say the number one fear is I'm afraid I'll die and I haven't written this.
Yeah.
It's not like I fear it will be successful. It's like my big fear is that I'm not going to write it and I'm going to hate myself. So I think that's the biggest fear, is not writing it. By the time I talk to them, and the people who are really motivated to actually get it done are like, I have wanted to do this for so long.
So is that the point at which a lot of times you'll meet these authors?
Yeah. Almost everybody has had it bubbling and burning for a while.
And so when they come to, they're like, I'm ready. It's time. I just need help. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not going to be, it's like, okay, now I've decided to run the marathon. It's not going to be easy, but at least I've decided and I know how to move forward. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what a relief that has to be. So what do you think is the number one thing that most people don't know? Like, what's a secret that if you could say, here's the little dirty little secret about getting your book written that most people don't know?
Well, how much, is it the number? I always get like, is this the number one
Well,
secret?
just a big secret.
Okay, I'm like, well, I don't know. It's up in the top 5.
Yeah.
Is knowing where you stop and figuring out how you're going to get around. So having a method or a trick to use. Like for me, when I'm writing, I can get stuck. I know kind of where I get stuck, and I know if I go outside or go for a hike and talk into my recorder about whatever that is, and then play it back, it's like, oh my God, just thinking and talking away from paper and pencil, away from the computer can be the most helpful thing. Or taking someone out for a beer and just saying, can you ask me questions about this topic? So I can just think about it more and come at it fresh. So the secrets have to do with getting away from your writing and coming at it in a new way when you get stuck, and also just knowing where you tend to get stuck.
Well, I think what's really interesting about that is, as you're saying it, I don't think a lot of us consider that writing. So I use that tool a lot. My phone, I'm so grateful for phones now that you can talk into, because I'll be driving and I have all these ideas. I have a whole download of information. And what do I do with it now? Because by the time I get to my destination, I might forget it all.
Right.
So,
right.
Or not have time to write it down. So that's amazing. And I really appreciate that you said that, because that's a form of writing, even though you're talking it through.
Absolutely.
And then that interview piece, I mean, you do that a lot I mean, from our shared client, I know that that's part of what you do, is that interview process. But that's fair. Like, it's okay to do that as a writer. Like,
oh my gosh,
thanks for giving us permission to do that.
Yeah. Well, I always believe, like, whatever it takes, by any means necessary, to get that thing across the finish line. Because, as you know, the energy of starting a book and not getting it done, better not to start it. Honestly, a half-written book is just an total energetic drain. Even if you think you're not thinking about it, something in you is holding on to that. So I'm really determined to just figuring out where people's thing is, where they'll stop, and coming up with strategies and ways. Let's just sit down together and bring this thing across the finish line. So, yeah.
And I think that's amazing that there is a strategy behind it. It's not just sit down and type. And I think that, probably in the back of my mind, I had a program running about that I would sit down at my computer and it would just flow out of my head and I would type it out and it would be so beautiful. And that just isn't the way it works. I think it works for some people who that's what they are, is an author, and that's what they do for work. But for most of us, it doesn't work that way. It comes in these downloads. It comes when we're having an amazing conversation with somebody. These ideas happen. It comes in dreams,
Yes.
So all of that, is fair game for writing your book. I think that's great news.
Well, and also when you start to write your book, I really believe that line about, the universe conspires. I think once you've decided and gotten really clear on your book topic and the argument that you're making, or the question that you're answering, things start to happen like crazy around you, just to keep that, you start to see the world through that lens, and you see evidence and you see stories evolving all around you. And dream time is huge. Or just, I can't believe I heard the guy next to me at Subway said something to his friend and I realized it was my book title. Or, you hear all those stories.
Yeah, that's really cool. I have a funny story about that. When I was a kid, I used to paint a lot. I thought I was going to be a painter at one point in my life. And I used to dream, when I was painting a lot, I would dream these paintings.
Yeah.
And I would wake up the next morning and think, man, that was cool. I wish I thought of that.
Right. I know.
And then, months, this was going on for months. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me, wait a minute, that's in my head.
That is hilarious.
It either came from a muse or I thought it up. So
that is so funny.
So funny. Well, it took me a while though to figure that out. So
Yep, you own that one.
Yeah,
You own that idea.
So I think we kind of had touched on a little bit, but what do you think stops most people? So when they get to you, they're ready, but there's a time before that. What do you think stops people from starting or finishing a book?
Well, what stopped you?
Uh, I thought the idea was a whole and complete.
Right.
And when I got to writing it, I I think it wasn't.
Okay.
And then also, I think for me, I'm always like, I mean, such an incredible idea. Like it fills my life. And then I have 39 other ideas in that same day.
Yeah.
So that's me. I mean, my highest inspiration are ideas. So when in one of my biggest education trainings, that was a question of what is your inspiration? And people around me are like, God and nature. And when it came to me, I'm like, oh gosh, it's ideas.
Yeah.
That is the thing that gets me going the most.
Yeah.
If I could just sit and give 1,000 ideas a day, I would be in heaven.
Yeah.
So keeping on to one idea, like as I said, I have 3 books going.
Right.
Because I had these 3. What's interesting about it is, though, I've had them going for about 3 years. They've started to merge.
Oh.
So yeah, 2 of them specifically. Yeah. So anyway,
needed that time.
Yeah. So what are some other things? What are things that stop people?
So so your 2 were great. One, that you're not clear enough on exactly what the book is about. Another thing is it is hard and there are so many other things to do. It really requires a level of discipline, even if there are tools for getting outside and thinking about it. It requires a high level of discipline that not everybody is ready for. And we can romanticize it a little bit. Oh, it's so beautiful to sit in a cabin and write. And then it's like, oh my God, it's hell to sit in a cabin and write. I just want to go and be anywhere else.
I know my dream is to go to Sicily for a month and write in the Aeolian Islands.
Yeah. Half of it would be amazing to be in Sicily and writing, and half of it you would be saying, why did I come all this way to feel like this? So writing is just all of the human experience in it. And I say that loving it and respecting it so much. So there's that. There's the distraction from an idea, which you were kind of touching on, just like, oh my gosh, like I'm growing and changing as I'm writing this, and the topic therefore is growing and changing. So being able to be fluid with it too is a big one. They feel it pigeonholes them. And then visibility and sharing their own story is a big stopper. Like, oh, I want to tell my story, but I have to wait until my grandparents and parents and sisters and brothers have all passed on, because there's that. They feel like that aspect of visibility, plus just the visibility factor anyway. So there's a zillion things that stop people.
I do think that's a big one. And as I started to write what I was writing, it's a modality. I mean, I teach them all the time. I write them. But when I went to write these 2, I found they felt a little personal. Like you're exposing something about yourself when you write a book. Maybe a lot about yourself when you write a book. So I was curious about that, if that was something that stopped a lot of people. And I was actually surprised at myself that I had that concern come up. It was really like, what's this about?
Yeah, we don't want to be excommunicated from the tribe when you get right down to the bottom sphere. You don't want to be judged or I want, there's a little bit of us that likes to kind of remain anonymous and not be seen in that degree.
Yeah, and there's this sense of, once this is on paper, everybody knows how weird the inside of my own mind is. So that it was very, very interesting to.
And the flip side of that is that's the thing that always is the best. The thing that the things that, I don't want to tell people that. I'll tell them up to there, but I won't tell them that. Those are the
Yeah.
things that always, always are the coolest, or the ones the scariest blog to post. Because
Yeah.
it's
And
the
they're always the ones that,
with.
but they're always the ones that people relate to the most.
Yes,
It seems
absolutely.
like you hear story after story of that is what people really, because they know the truth of themselves and they
Right.
can tell when you're telling the truth. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's
Especially if
probably
it was scary. Yeah. Yep.
that really big fear. One of the other things that stopped me was as I wrote, and you kind of touched on this, like people don't want to be pigeonholed.
Mm-hmm.
We, with our shared clients, find that you gotta find a topic and stick with that one.
Right.
So I found that what I thought I was writing was so specific. And then each paragraph that I wrote, I'm like, oh my God, that could be a whole book.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah. So even though I really know this, I know you have to get specific. I know that. I found that I'm like, well, that could be a whole thing and that could be a whole nother chapter. I
Yeah.
really like, it's almost like the whole thing kept expanding on me to the point where I'm like, I don't even know what I'm talking about now. So I'm just going to give up for today.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's such a good point, because you've got to just say, you have to come at a book like, this is not the ultimate definitive representation of me that will ever exist. This is just a moment in
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
something that I'm thinking about right now, something that has caught my attention right now in my life. And of course, everything, you, the world, everyone else is going to be different down here. So yeah, and I know you were talking about a little bit of how to even get more clear on your ideas, but that's sort of an argument to simplifying your ideas and knowing that you're not going to be able to explain every nuance.
Yeah. That's a hard part.
Just sometimes a book is a broad brush, and sometimes a book is deeply down. Maybe there is a book that comes out of that one idea, but this book is more of a watercolor.
Yeah. So another thing I've heard a lot of people say is, I don't think I have something to say that's 500 pages long or 350 pages long. Something I've noticed though is a lot of books are more like 150 pages long. So how do you guide people through that piece of how long their book should be?
Yeah, that's so interesting. This client in Seattle was really wanting to put the length of the book first. Sometimes we have to get
Mm.
into writing it a little bit to see what it's going to be. She knew how long she wanted it. She knows how she reads breezily. She wants a 90-page book, and that's it.
Ah,
That's fine. She wants a breezy, light read. Some people, it kind of doesn't matter. They just know what they're going to say. And then I think most people that you and I would work with are tending toward keeping it breezier and short, rather than, just including material for material's sake.
well, I have to say, and this is just me, this is the way I read. Actually, I always read books as if they are if I'm learning a new modality or if I'm learning, I start at the back every time.
You do?
I always do. That's
Oh,
why I don't actually like a Kindle, because I can't read from the back. I start at the back because what I find is that's where all the good stuff is.
that is so funny.
And then if I realize that I don't actually understand what the modality is or what I'm supposed to learn, then
Right?
I'll go to this front and start to read through. But what I find is in my own learning style that I don't necessarily have time
Yeah.
for 100 pages of backstory or re-explaining
Ah,
something I already know.
yeah.
So when I was writing for myself, I want to write in the style that I read.
Yeah.
Well, that isn't everybody. I wanted to eliminate all of that and just
Jump right in.
jump right in.
Jump
So,
right into chapter 8.
yeah, so that there's all those different styles. So how
Yeah.
do you guide people navigate them through that
Yeah.
maze realistically?
Well, yes, and that's such a good maze. Well, again, look at who your ideal person is that you're writing to. And you're not going to know whether they read the book frontwards or backwards, but you're like a business, like, let's get to the let's get to the meat of the matter. And somebody else might be, I love to linger in the story.
Yeah.
You can't really know those
Yeah.
your specific person, because two people could be in the same world and have that.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of the delivery system of the book, how it's going to, how long it's going to be, if it's graphic and fun and funky on the page versus very straightforward or elegant. There's a whole look and feel to the book that's you can take into consideration. Again, just looking at how your reader consumes or is likely to consume. The same Seattle client I keep talking about is committed to using emojis throughout her book. She wants it to look like fun, interspersed text conversations. So that's a very conscious decision about how people will take in information and be entertained.
And so is that what you do, is kind of talk back and forth with your client about how they want it to look, and then advise on maybe how things are normally done in that genre? Like, how do you actually have that conversation?
Yeah, well, she's going to do the emojis. She's going to, I think there are books that use them for sure. Well, I think most people, one of the conversations we have when we're starting to work together is like, what books do you love? Like, what are the books that you go back to? And so we use those as a guiding factor. And sometimes we do outings to Powell's or a bookstore and just look at a whole bunch of books and see what they gravitate to. And that's an assignment. People spend an afternoon in the bookstore and just see what's out there. So that's an ongoing conversation, because, money aside, you can kind of do things if you have ideas for things popping out of your book. Or I have a client who did essential oil pocket in the book because she's an essential oil person. So she put a little pocket in there. So many, the sky's kind of the limit. Certainly coming up with cool ideas is unlimited.
This is a loaded question, is there any wrong way to do it? Is there anything that's just like absolutely without question, do not do that thing? What would that be, if anything?
If anything, I'd say don't not proofread your book, because I'm coming back to that and this kind of boring answer, that you could have gone this like super cool graphic way that looks so beautiful, but then no one really needs, I'm going to save some money at the end and not get it proofread. Just to remember that the book is a legacy that's going to outlive you and be around in physical form longer than you are, and it represents you. So use that as a guiding principle too. So I don't know if there's anything wrong except having mistakes in it that you could have controlled.
You could have fixed. I think that's amazing advice. I now with ebooks, you can write a book on the computer and have it in it.
I know.
Exactly. So I read a book once, and it was on a health topic. It was about vitamin D.
Yeah.
And it wasn't proofread or edited in any way, shape, or form. And the information was amazing. This person was a researcher.
Yeah.
And their research was incredible. There was a lot of it in there that I skimmed over it because I didn't even understand it. But it was good that it was there. Some of it was there.
Yeah.
Amazing research. But it was the story kind of went in a circle. Like you could tell he would restart the same story somewhere else, and lots of typos and stuff like that. For me, because the information was good, I didn't mind.
Yeah.
But it might stop some people from reading the book. So I think that's amazing advice.
Well, remember that it really represents you, and that might make you do a level of care with it that it's like, wait a minute, I want this out tomorrow, but it's also going to be out for a long time, and we can fix things now in Kindle so easily. So.
Yeah. Well, and again, one of the processes I use, and I don't know if you tell other people to do this, but I will read it out loud to myself, and then I'll read it out loud to someone else.
Yeah.
Because I know that what makes sense in my mind doesn't always make sense to somebody else.
That's a great practice. Yeah.
Lots of times I've changed things after reading it out loud because the person's like, well, wait, I don't get that. Well, if you don't get it, I have to change it.
Right.
So something in NLP we say is the meaning of your communication is how it's received.
Yes.
Not how it's put out.
Yes.
So I always, try to remember that piece, that even though it makes perfect sense to me, I never argue for it when it doesn't make sense to somebody else, because they're not in my head.
Exactly.
Thank goodness for them.
Brilliant advice. I love that little NLP nugget too. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real true thing. So what can a person do to get started? Let's say a person's just at the beginning and they're ready to get started. What would be your number one or top 5 piece of advice to get started?
See, all right, I was just going to say write it down, but maybe it's worth having a conversation with. Go out with a buddy and say, I want to write a book, and here's what I think, a trusted friend. And can you explain the topic of your book in a sentence? Or does it go on
that's good.
10 paragraphs? And if it goes on for 10 paragraphs, you might not be quite at the point to sit down and really start thinking about it. But if you can say, I want to write a book about why, how to find shingles. I'm just staring out at the roof. How to find shingles that won't fall off, and the art of shinglery and whatever.
Is shinglery a word?
I know.
I like it though. I might use it.
So be able to that might be a really good place to start. This book is about blank, and be able to really articulately say it. And if you can get there, then you're probably in a good place to start. Sitting down and, again, it helps to do it with a trusted person. It's pulling something from the metaphysical to the physical is just like, okay, it's a world of ideas and I've got to get it into something that's this big. How do I do that? And it really helps to have someone who's like, okay, let's look at all the pieces that you want to get in there and start shaping them and start moving them around and finding the thread that goes through each of them. And then coming up with a way to share it with a reader that's going to be so compelling and interesting.
Yeah, the compelling and interesting part is I think the hard part. That's the part I think so. How do we know if our idea is compelling and interesting to someone else?
Yeah, test it. Yeah.
That's really, really good advice. And in there's that nugget again about the core message. That would be my little piece of advice. It's almost in anything, that you and I both do. You have to know what your core message is, and it's your core message for right now.
Yeah.
Because your core message may change over time. I tend to find that it doesn't. So for me, my core message is the smallest shift makes the biggest change. So that's the way I think. What's the smallest thing I can do for the biggest impact? So when I work with clients, that's the way I work. What's the smallest thing we can do to create the biggest thing? So when people work with me, they know that that's what I'm about. So if a person can find what their real core message is, and then the topic, maybe let's say that the topic may change over time, but what's your topic for right now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which is a message for myself too, because I have a problem with one topic.
Yeah, and a topic is just like a little gift of that's a variation on your core message that just looks like a blue wrapped package today, and tomorrow it might be a gigantic yellow package over here, but it's still from you, and so that's what I really try and come back. This one thing is just right now. It's not the definitive book of your life. Yeah.
That is amazing imagery. And see, that's what's beautiful about Madeleine. She figures that kind of beautiful imagery out. Yeah, a little gift for right now.
Yeah, and you're not so attached to it either, which is the other thing. We've got to put our heart and soul into what we're writing and then let it go and trust.
Yeah, and being attached to the outcome too. I think, if we're thinking about what happens to this book later, is it a New York Times bestseller? I think if you're starting out with your first book, you would dream that that's what would happen, but it's more about just getting the message out into the world, into the field.
Yep. Yeah, and have whatever intention you want around that as you do. Bigger the better, for sure. Yeah. But again, just put all you can into it, and then let it go, because there might be another one. Oftentimes there's another one. The real book is right behind.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I think that's terrific advice, because I think that's really true. Once you get the pipes warmed up,
Like, oh, now I know what I'm here to talk about.
Yeah, now I know what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So what can a person do to prepare to work with you? So let's say they have a book idea, maybe they've jotted some things down. What can a person do to begin to work with a professional ghostwriter? Let's start there.
Yeah, well, if they want it, it depends on if they need a ghostwriter, or if they want a editor for their own work. Well, for me personally, we could always just chat about it and just see where it's at. And I would ask you questions, just helping to kind of drill down into what your vision is and what your goals are for this book, and what your life is like, really, because can your life accommodate this right now? It's a little bit like getting a dog. You have to feed it every day and take care of it. And are you ready to accommodate that now, is one of the considerations too, unless you're hiring a ghostwriter. But even in that case, you're going to be being interviewed a whole lot. So yeah, so for me, I'd say hop on the phone with me if you ever want to chat about it and see if it has legs, and see if your life can fit it right now, meaning your book idea and your book. And to just try and start writing, see where you go and see what your writing is like, see how the act of writing feels in this way, because we think, oh, I write a lot of emails, I write a lot of blah, 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 I can write a book. See what writing in a sustained way feels like. And if that is pleasurable or interesting for you, that's a consideration too.
So they don't have to be at any particular point to work with you.
No, some people just, I've had this idea for 10 years. And some people come just with the barest shimmer of an idea. And some people come with a box of papers, like, here's what I've been written on this book so far. So anywhere in between.
So would you say a person just really has to have a desire, and the time? They have to be, realistic, and maybe you fill people in on that at a time, and a real message for the book, or a cool idea?
Yeah, a cool idea for your book that feels marketable. That's the other thing, is like, is this book something anyone else in the world would want to read? That even if you're very clear on your core message, it's like, does the marketplace want this? Does anybody in the world want to read about this, even if it's very crystal clear? So it's looking at what what we're feeling like the world is itching to know or to consume.
Well, how would a person determine that, whether or not their idea has a place in the market?
I think that's when you need to talk to someone and just talk it through, talk about your goals with the book. And it's not a bad idea to look at what's included in a proposal to an agent, because those are the factors that help when we talk to you about what kind of market there would be for your book. But what's your platform like? Who do you know? What books have done well that are kind of like this but not exactly like this? What was behind those books that did well? Look at what those publishing companies are doing. Is that the type of book that you see a lot? Is it too much of this type of book? Do we need a new angle? What do people who are interested in this buy books? Because maybe it's a very cool topic, but they're not the book buyer public. Like, back to our skateboard kid,
Yeah, they're more into a video.
Ways to scout a skateboard aimed at 11-year-old boys, that might not actually be a book that's read. So those are all the kind of considerations that we make.
Yeah. However, some fantastic story about a skateboarder might speak to the teen or the tween audience.
Yes. So that's why we look, okay, maybe the way that you're looking at it isn't quite right, but what if we turn it? Or what about that kid's parents? Or, so turning the idea and looking at it from different angles sometimes helps.
And I think that is where having a professional really can help. Somebody that has that knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's kind of a unique perspective that you have, because you see a lot of different books and a lot of different writers. And you kind of have an idea of how that could be rotated.
Yeah.
Where a person who just has their own perspective about their story, they're so immersed in it, they don't have that broader, bigger picture that you can offer, which I think is an amazing reason to even just get support from a professional when you're considering, putting this together. Is that something somebody could do, is work with you where maybe you don't ghostwrite, but you counsel them through? Is that something you do?
Yeah, I actually have what's called book mapping, and that's exactly what we do. We sit together for 1 day or 2 days and get to know each other extremely well as we pick apart like what you're here on earth to say, like what your core message is, and then what the container of this book is going to be. And then we start to really get specific, like how long is it? How many chapters? Does each chapter have a story? What are some of the stories? What are the lessons? What's the reader's journey? We start to look at all of those things, and we make a map through your whole book, so that whether you're writing it or I'm writing it, there's guidance the whole way through.
So I guess that leads me to another question. How accessible is hiring a ghostwriter or an editor? I mean, is it cost prohibitive? Are there layers to it? How accessible really is it to the average person?
It can be a big investment, but it's not necessarily so. There's a lot of mid-level people who are really good. There's a lot, you could go on Fiverr and do it on the down low, but you might not be pleased with what you get. So it's people are sometimes surprised and sometimes they've budgeted ahead, but it's not a couple $100 to edit a book. It takes weeks of work. So you're supporting an editor for quite a,
Yeah.
Editor. It really is weeks and weeks of work. So it's not prohibitive, but it's a factor as you're putting your book together, if you want to go that way.
Yeah.
That's why I started to offer book mapping, because it was a more reasonable way of coming out front and getting really clear on your book so that you can get through it more easily.
Madeleine, do you have a class on that yet?
Pardon?
Do you have a class on that yet?
On book mapping, I'm doing a 2-day version on the Oregon coast in September. I'm putting that together. I haven't done an online class, but I offer it 1-to-1. And this will be a small retreat group for the first time, but always can do it.
Is that class already full?
The retreat?
Yeah.
It's not. And I have a page, almost put it together, so I'll send it to you.
Okay, great. And we can offer that to our viewers.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. I really feel like there would be a lot of people, I mean, just the clients that we have who are all talking about writing books, and our friends and other practitioners that we work with. And so I can think of a lot of people who that would be a wonderful place to start.
Oh, awesome.
To map it out, to see if your idea really works in the real world. If people are anything like me, what goes on in my head may not be something that, other people are interested in, so I think that's a fantastic place to start. Back to being cost prohibitive or not, I took a class with a woman who was teaching how to get your book published. Mm-hmm. And she had won a Hay House, what do you call that? Contract.
Contract,
yeah. Publisher's contract. And in that contract, she got $10,000 to finish the book.
Yeah.
And I mean, that sounds like a lot of money. And she spent 5 of it with an editor. And what was interesting is the editor kept sending it back. And it was almost a year. Her time was almost up with Hay House. And they were saying, look, you have a deadline. It better be finished. And she said there was a point at which with the editor, she had to just say, I'm done. I can't change another thing.
Yeah.
But it was quite expensive. But it doesn't need to be that expensive, or does it?
It doesn't need to be that expensive. No, it's a yeah, I think that $5,000 for a, you could certainly spend it. That's not an insane price by any
Mm-hmm.
stretch. You could save a little bit on that.
So I
But
think that part's, go ahead, sorry.
yeah, it is an investment. I just
And
have to build a budget for it.
yeah, and I think that part is it might be something that does stop people because we don't know what that's all about.
Right.
So knowing that you can maybe do pieces of it, you're mapping,
Mm-hmm.
and then other pieces along, and the editing is at the end, right? Once it's very much put together.
Yep. The editing comes at the end. I do work with some clients. We do a book map and then they write chapter by chapter. So sometimes it's not at the end. Sometimes it's as the book is being built. Yeah.
And how long do people normally work with you?
My fastest turnaround has been a couple of months, and that was unusual. So 6-month average would get it done. I just finished about 1.5 years with my bear guy, just because he would be gone for months at a time traveling, and it can be stretched out. I like to kind of keep people moving just to keep the energy good and vibrant. And that's the other thing. If you want to feel good as you write your book and inspire, if it's going into year 2, you might not feel that same.
Yeah. And I love that you're concerned about the energy of it, because the energy that goes into it is going to be the energy that people feel when they read it. So that makes all the difference. Yeah.
Yeah. So the book that you're writing in Italy with your glass of wine in the sun,
I mean,
some pasta.
wouldn't that be the best?
It would be really nice.
Okay. So I know that everybody can't work with you, but I really do, guys, if you're watching, I would encourage you to reach out to Madeleine and find out if she's a great fit for you. I would encourage you to look to her first. However, Madeleine, I want to know, are there signs that we should look out for when a person goes to work with a ghostwriter or editor or copywriter? What are some warning signs that maybe that person isn't the best to work with, or not legit, or maybe overcharging? What are some of the pitfalls?
Yeah, talk to a few people. That's more like advice than a pitfall. And just definitely feel how you feel, because it's a strangely intimate relationship. I get to know everybody's deep, dark world. And you just want to be able to really feel trust. I'm going to be fairly intimate with this person. I want to really feel trusting of them. Many editors will do a paid trial edit, like here's what it looks like when I edit a few pages, just so you're ready for it. What else? Can the person really sit and listen to you? Like, are you feeling like they share your vision for this book by the things that they're saying? So really
important.
pay attention to how they pay attention to you. If they're like, oh yeah, that reminds me of da-da-da-da-da's book, when, you want them to be all yours and focused on you and share this same vision. So just, if they seem like they're trying to put you into another category, or they're not really listening to you, I would use that as a red flag.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing advice. And I think talking to a few people probably does help, because you can find out what does feel like you and what doesn't feel like you. When you know what you don't want, sometimes you know what you do.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really smart.
Yeah. And like anything, some editors are going to be very loving in their editing of your material, and some are just going to so you also have to kind of prepare yourself and know that, well, the way I describe it to people is like, any suggestion I make is in service to your idea and your reader. Mm-hmm. And that's all I'm worried about. I'm not worried about me or you. It's your notion and your reader. So to have a little bit of a thick skin.
Yeah. There's one thing that I heard that a person would never think about, and it's making sure that your editor actually speaks your same language. Meaning, If you speak American English and you hire an editor that speaks Scottish English, they don't spell things the same, and their syntax isn't quite the same either. So there's a problem there. Also, someone who speaks Indian English, it's very, very different. So in our experience, you want to find someone who really does speak American English if that's the language you speak.
Yes.
So we found that out the hard way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, that's a very good consideration.
Yeah, but you don't think about it. You think English is English, but it isn't. A different place, you have different sayings that mean different things and different spelling. So,
yep. Good advice.
Okay, so my last question for you is, the book is all done. Do you advise people on self-publishing or finding a representative or a publishing house, or do you pass them on to someone else?
Well, I have people I can refer them to. For a couple people, I have written their pitches to agents. Now everything goes to an agent and not to the publishing company. And I have helped write them. It's not my complete expertise, and I haven't been in that. I was in magazine publishing, so I haven't been in the book publishing world. That's for traditional publishing. So I can help them create the materials that they're going to need. There are people who do that for them. And then in self-publishing, I can help people put together what they need. People do need to know that you can hear my dog.
I know she wants out.
Walk. Pearl, can you sorry about that. And in self-publishing, it's you do this first, then this, and this. You have to the only caveat with self-publishing is your platform, and building a launch strategy usually is part of it, just because you don't want to publish a book and then just let it be hidden. So the launch strategy with someone like you is really important.
So do you have an opinion, a preference when you recommend to people? Self-publishing is huge right now, and there are a lot of benefits and a lot of pitfalls. Do you have an opinion yourself about self-publishing or being published by?
Yeah, I'd say there's some people, like the Bears author, he's 70, no interest in self-publishing. I'm going to pitch agents. That's all I want to do. So in his case, we went that route, and he just got a nibble from an agent yesterday.
Wow.
I'm excited. And if something happens with that, it's going to be a year before a book ever even begins to come out. So that's a factor. The curve is long. Most people I work with are like, I want my book to be out there. I'm ready to market it. I don't think this is the kind of book that would be picked up by a publisher. People are more realistic. They see their way of making money with a book, not necessarily through book sales.
Well, and in the genre I'm in as well, and in many of the authors that you know too, you have an idea, and that idea turns into a class or a retreat that needs to be sold now. So you don't have time to wait 2 years for your book to be published. So there, it's a little bit apples and oranges. Yeah. So anyway, I can tell you. It is. So I can tell you need to go. Your dog's wanting to go, but this has been fascinating for me, and I hope it's fascinating for all our viewers. And I know there's so many people who are going to get a lot of their questions answered from this little interview. So thank you so much, Madeleine. And if we think of some more questions, will you come back?
Absolutely. I always love talking with you, Liz. And thank you so much for the idea and the wonderful questions.
Oh, you're welcome. So everybody, we will get you. Thanks. We'll get you Madeleine's information, her contact information. Madeleine, do you have a website?
Yep, intherightplace.com, WRITE.
Okay, we'll make sure people have that and the ability to contact you and find out about your upcoming class. And everybody, if Madeleine does end up with an online class, I might encourage her to do so. And I'll make sure that you have the first access to it. So we'll talk soon. Thanks, Madeleine.
Thanks, Liz. Okay, bye-bye.
And bye. Bye, everybody. This is Liz with Transform One Idea, where we're always exploring the small shift, making the biggest change, and Madeleine Eno with In the Right Place. We'll talk soon. Ciao for now. Bye.